Welcome to the Real Estate and Wealth Podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of real estate investing and wealth creation. This podcast is brought to you by Calvert Home Mortgage Investment Corporation, your trusted, caring, and responsive short-term mortgage lender in Alberta and Ontario. We explore strategic and tactical solutions to elevate your real estate portfolio, drawing insights from seasoned Canadian investors and trusted advisors. In each episode, we dive into various aspects of real estate investing, including market trends, property analysis, financing strategies, risk management, and much more. Whether you're a seasoned real estate investor looking to expand your portfolio or a beginner taking those first steps, this podcast is for you. Super excited for today. We have Al-Karim from Propra. Very excited to have you on the pod today. I know you have quite the extensive background. So to ensure I don't miss anything, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Al-Karim Khimji. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Propra. We are a property management software platform. A bit about my background. Born and raised in Calgary, and I developed, coming out of undergrad, I developed a hotel. So from a pile of dirt through to a cash flowing asset. And I did everything in between, from working with the GC, doing franchising and financing, new hotel opening. And I think it just changed my way of thinking about the power of real estate, because it went from this massive pile of dirt into this cash flowing asset with a team and people and happy people. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So after that, I pursued an MBA, worked for a private equity fund for a while, was at McKinsey for a while. And while I was at McKinsey, and this is where the Propra story begins, is I started to think about multifamily and rentals, because I always thought that compared to hotels, that rentals were so easy, or this was my conception, because there's all these constraints in hospitality around, cinnamon buns and shampoo bottles and curved shower rods. And, and then franchise fees, right? Because, those are material. But obviously they give us a bunch of stuff, right? But anyways, and so I always thought multifamily was so easy. And so I started building my own rental portfolio. And I was like, oh, this is a joke. And then as I scaled, I realized it's not. Anyways, that's some context for me. But yeah, born and raised in Calgary, super committed to community, and excited to chat today.
Awesome. Perfect. And what were some of the struggles, I guess, shifting from the hotel business to multifamily? And did any of the background at McKinsey translate into what you're growing and developing now?
I think into growing and developing now, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I think that training was really about, how do we understand a problem, right? I think that's what really consultants is really about, is what is the problem that we're solving, deeply understanding it. And I think that by listening to the market, we had this notion that, we've got to focus on these big players, 10,000 doors plus, because that's where the market is.
Scale, yeah.
And that's how you make a business. But actually what's interesting in Canada and the US, about 75% of the market is fragmented. It's these small, 0 to 5 and then 5 to 5,000s. And that's actually the bulk of the market. And so we've been focusing on them because we've realized that there's this huge gap. They don't have, folks don't have an IT department. Right. If you're 0 to 5, you're most likely doing it yourself. If you're 5 to 5,000, most likely you don't have an IT department either. And you're also doing it by yourself. And you don't have time to worry about integrations and other work. You got into the business for the accretive value of real estate. You did not get into the business for bathroom lights, kitchen faucets, and
and all those fun things.
That's not what you did. And so I think the McKinsey train, come back to the question, really helped me think about what is the problem that we're solving? What is the customer talking about? And whatever they're complaining about, that's what we go after. And I think that's why we're winning customers.
Right. Where are the points of friction, and developing a thesis around one specific point or multiple points, and then building to solve that.
Yeah. And I think it's exactly that. And I think also when we hear it in different scales across different geographies, in different use cases, because we do rental, we do condo, we have some retail as well that we can serve through our platform. And because the software is comprehensive, or it's so similar in terms of functions, when we listen to those problems across that matrix of use cases, they're all the same. Right. And so it's just diving deeper into that. Or my favorite is when someone says, but I use Excel for this. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Right.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Or they're like, the other day we were talking to a customer and they're like, well, he was like, can you hold on? And then someone came in and said, we've got to just order paper. And I'm like, for what? And he's like, yeah, we go through like a case of paper a month. And I was like, that's a lot of paper.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was just sort of unpacking, the why and just and going deeper and deeper.
Being curious.
Yeah. Being curious. Exactly.
Yeah. So okay, let's take a step back from Propra for just a minute, because I'm really curious as to why real estate? Why did you get started in real estate?
Yeah.
How did
Great
that
question.
come about?
Yeah. So I grew up in a family business.
Okay.
Focused on hospitality.
Okay.
And so that's my nice way of saying, actually, I grew up either in the back of a motel or across the alley. And I never, I think some people think like it's like a bad thing. I actually loved it. I didn't know different. So I just got this like amazing training in operating a business, operating a small business.
Right.
The value of family, how family comes together. And it's just, and you see a lot of successful businesses are actually around family, or they're around family values. And one of the things I would love to chat about is like team and how like it all comes together when you have like the right people. But that's how I grew up till I was about 11, and I started to see this. And then my summer job was basically working at front desk, or like sometimes there was like a football game or something, and I'd be like the guy in the parking lot and be like $10. Right. But all those skills, like having that job at a younger age was fantastic. And I think that helped me realize the value of real estate and the value of business. And I've always kind of been drawn to it personally. Like I love it. I love, it's like following along. I love like those macroeconomic factors, but real estate is a very interesting place. And
it is.
It's also the largest asset class, which blows my mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so you grew up in it.
Yeah.
And obviously through that, you've talked about there was a lot of learning, particularly in hospitality.
Yeah.
Did you draw learning from outside of being in the business through the family? Like a lot of what I find really interesting is how little formal education there is as it relates to real estate investing.
Totally.
We talked about what you guys are doing with Propra as it relates to the operating side, but did you pull information in from anywhere outside of osmosis with the family?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is a couple things. I think a lot of it is just you do it by experience.
Yeah.
Because I think like even when you think about like structuring a mortgage, and this is specifically for that 0 to 5 owner, is when you think about structuring a mortgage, you think about timing, you think about like a variable mortgage. What is my exit? Is it transferable? You don't learn those lessons until you actually go through it. Because I think the first time you invest in a property, or the second time or third time, you're always so optimistic. You're like, I see this guy, he bought it at 320, he put in 20 grand, he sold it for 420, he made all this money, he lived in it for a year, he made it his primary residence, he did all these things, and I'm gonna be, like this much richer. And then so that's actually what happened to me. And and what happened in that case was I bought a property in 2015, end of 2014 into 15.
Right.
The Calgary market changed.
Yeah.
And I bought a property for actually 345. I put in 20. So now I've invested 365. During COVID, I got an offer for 255.
Right.
And that was 10 years later.
Yeah.
I sold it recently for kind of in the low threes.
Right.
And I learned about like capital loss. I learned about how it was my primary residence. And I think the piece of this puzzle that is the most valuable answer to your question is we just got to talk to people. You got to talk to people. You got to build that network. You got to build that peer group of folks who have done it before. And then you can learn, right? What have they done? How did they do it? And I think sometimes we just don't realize some of the complexity that exists until you're actually in it.
Yeah.
Right. And you're having to solve it. So how do you learn from others? And I think that's a huge piece of this puzzle of real estate to be successful. Sorry.
And on that note, did you lean into your family for building your team and those resources and the expertise, or how did you build your peer group?
I think a bit of both.
Yeah.
A bit of both, because I think like you want to talk internally, right? But you also want to avoid the sort of the groupthink, right? Because we all come from that same mentality.
Yeah.
Right. And so I kind of like talking to everybody. Right. And I also think that I know this may feel like a bore, but like, like each of these brokerages, like Collier, CBRE, they always do these
Yep.
like podcasts, or they do these national presentations every quarter,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Like on the outlook of the blank market, industrial. And I like to listen to everything. I like the industrial, I like the retail, I like the hospitality, I like the multifamily, I like the single family.
Right.
I listen to the seniors ones, the storage ones, because
Everything. Yeah.
I consume because there are nuggets in there
Yep.
that are really valuable. And then I love going to conferences, but I miss a lot of the sessions, and I just like hanging out with people, and
Right.
like, because that's that you get this convening mechanism of like great people who have experienced something. Because then in that moment you may not know what to do, but when you need it, is there that peer group that you can just call?
Yeah, you can connect that thought through that conversation or through that piece of information you drew in.
Or maybe they've had a similar asset type, right?
Yeah.
And so there's something there about how do you have this like peer group that you can surround yourself with that can give you, I think, different ideas, right, and challenge you. Because there's a lot of things we honestly like. I love this quote and I hate this quote, but it's like we just don't know. We don't know.
Totally.
Yeah.
And without wading into it and being curious and doing, it's really hard to learn.
Yeah. And even just like you could have never guessed like something like COVID and what it would have done to the market, or timing it. Yeah. Like there's still this place that my wife and I chat about. We're like, oh, we should have just bought it during
COVID. Everybody's saying that about basically every asset.
Stocks,
that mid-March to mid-April period was the opportune time, but unfortunately, most of us were in that groupthink and moving psychologically in fear, where the great investors were taking action.
Yeah, and I think it's about how do we learn from these moments.
Yeah.
I remember like it was like around Christmas of 2018, it was like a stock market kind of dropped a bit for like a short window between like the 23rd and like the 2nd of January. And I remember being like, oh, we should take out all our money. And I'm glad we didn't. And I listened to someone who had been like, no, just time in market, just like calm down.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we learn from those moments? So I think that's the big one is, I think the big themes for me are, network, being able to chat with people and learn from them, and understanding the problem, and team.
Yeah. And what's really cool about the real estate investing community is this is exactly how most people's journey was, which is learning, which is the information being siloed, segmented.
Yeah.
And in turn, those that have been through it and have experience are so willing to have the conversations and give back and build that community. So for sure, being out there and networking, and ideally when you're networking, I'm sure you're providing a ton of value so that you're actually people want to network with you and build that relationship.
Yeah. I think it's a natural give and take.
Yeah. Should we shift back to Propra?
Yeah, 100%.
Sure.
I'd love to understand the story behind it, how it came to be.
Yeah, of course.
How you decided to go all in on it, and just the story about.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's probably
maybe the elevator pitch too, because I'm still I still want to be
let me
crystal clear on it.
Here we go. No. So at Propra, we are automating residential property management. What we've learned is that the administrative burden of managing a rental portfolio is significant. And so how do we use automation and AI to solve this problem? Now, you can argue that there are competitors out there, totally, right? But my favorite thing that I learn constantly by talking to customers and going to like industry events and trade shows, like we were just in, we were in Edmonton, we were in Winnipeg. Next month, I'm in London, Halifax, Hamilton. I was in Vancouver previously. And when you talk to customers, when you talk to prospects, and they say, hey, I'm using this software, I say, but how do you like it? Man, it's just fantastic.
Right.
They go on. And sometimes I have to cut them off. And I'm like, look, we got to schedule a call, And I think that is interesting, is because sometimes as you dig deeper, you uncover a more interesting problem. And so with Propra, what we've been able to do is we built a product that serves the full life cycle of the rental. Okay. So from move in to move out. And what does that include? Well, it includes the accounting, the CRM, the move in and move out inspection, the maintenance tracking and leasing and the coordination and scheduling of maintenance. We have the application process. We have an announcement. So like the Calgary version would be like parking lot clearing, and then in May we paint parking lot lines. And you want everyone to remove their cars.
Right.
Like that announcement that needs to go out to your be it your residents, or if you're a condo manager, maybe your residents, or if you're a property manager, your residents and owners.
Yeah.
And there's different messaging that goes out. And so how do you track all this information? And what we find a lot is, and this is my favorite, is you'll get on a video call with a prospect and they've got this massive filing cabinet behind them.
Right.
And I'm like, what's in there? And they're like, well, we got some old leases, we got this, we got... And it's interesting because some of these processes are archaic. And so how do we build a great little platform that is easy to use, that is cost effective, and helps bring that modern technology into the space?
Right.
So that's what we're doing.
And is this purely the administrative piece? Like how does Propra link with their QuickBooks or with their accounting software?
Yeah. So we actually have a full cycle double entry accounting platform.
Okay.
So we can do all the accounting in our platform.
Okay.
But if you want to use QuickBooks, we have a CSV file export. So you can just upload it there. But what makes our system unique is that because we know that, Jesse, you're in unit 101, Ryan, you're in 102, I'm in 103. Our system will, for example, one of the automations we have is we run rent roll on the first of the month, which is pretty straightforward.
Yep.
But we have a really cool feature that if you do pre-authorized debit, so it pulls your rent out of your bank accounts,
Right.
our system will automatically write those journal entries for the revenue.
Okay.
That's interesting because if typically 90% of your revenue, or hopefully 100% of your revenue, is coming in through pre-authorized debit, not like cash and check.
Yep.
Well, if now all that revenue work is completed in the platform, what are you doing? You're not doing that work.
Right.
Or your bookkeeper is not doing that work. And you're off doing something else. You're doing something more strategic. Maybe you're looking at a new place. Maybe you're turning over
Finding
unit
an extra
faster.
opportunity.
Maybe you're dealing with a tenant situation. Maybe you've got a bathroom light issue, whatever it is, right? But now we're creating more time for you to get to the real problem.
Yeah, wherever you can provide the most, you can focus on and define where you provide the most value.
Absolutely.
And live there as much as possible. Cool.
Yeah. So I think that is actually where we're adding value.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is our customers are actually growing their portfolios, but the team size isn't changing. Right. So like one of our customers, small portfolio, he started off with 10 units. He's at 19, but he's just doing it himself.
Cool.
Right. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And like 19 units is not small.
No,
Right? Like it's a lot of work because you think about it, like 2.5 people in each home.
Yeah.
Maybe you have 2 contacts in each one. Like that's a lot of stuff to manage.
Yeah.
And how do you remember, I changed this hot water tank or I fixed this light fixture?
Yeah.
You lose track after a while.
Totally.
For sure.
Right. And then when you scale, some of our customers have like 100 or 200 units. They've doubled and tripled, but their team sizes remain the same.
Wow.
And so that's an interesting signal of just the value of the platform and the software.
And does it track the communication as opposed to, tenants call, text, email you? Like, is the communication through the platform, or is there a way to track?
Yeah, there's a lot. So it depends on what they're calling in about. But like, for example, around maintenance, there's a lot of logging around that. Because that's the biggest one.
For
right?
sure.
You want to know what's actually happening with that asset.
Yeah.
Right. Like now if I were to look at buying something, I'm going to ask questions like, and these are really good nuggets for that 0 to 5 range.
This is how you're using the system to analyze future purchases.
Well, yes and no. So part of it is also like you want a good history of your asset.
Yeah.
Right? Did I change the hot water tank? When did I change it? What's the warranty on it?
Right.
How do you remember that stuff?
Yep.
Right? Like as soon as you have like, even in this guy's case, like he has 19 units. And
Well, I can't keep track of that with my own house.
I know, right? so how do you do it at scale?
Yeah.
And so and our system sort of tracks that. You can put in like the age of the roof. You can put in all this information. And you don't have to log it in initially. You can just put it in over time.
Over time, yeah.
But now you've got this tracking of great information.
Right.
And so my learning from that is that when I go look at buying the next place, the questions I'm going to ask, and this is actually very valuable for those who are, in that investing zone.
Yes.
Is, what were some of the typical maintenance problems you've had that have recurred? Have you had any insurance claims?
Yep.
Like we had this crazy situation in our home where our water line snapped before the main shutoff valve.
Okay.
So below the main shutoff valve,
Yeah.
the water line came off.
Okay.
And so there's just like this, you can't stop it.
Right.
And so we actually have to wait 2 hours for this. And this was fast, actually, what we've heard. And so we appreciate they showed up. It was like 9:00 at night, but they actually just to go outside this massive key thing and shut off the water line
Oh, wow.
to our home.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so like, I want to know what the history was there.
Yeah.
For sure.
What are those risks? And so those are some of the things I've learned in that process of we need to be able to track that information, and folks don't have a way of tracking it.
For sure.
And so how do we make it easy? So let's say you're in unit 101 and you report my bathroom light's not working. we have this cool feature as an AI guided troubleshooting that will kick back a question to you to say, tell us more about this problem.
Yeah.
Right. So my bathroom light, we know bathrooms place light is electrical. It's going to ask you a decision tree of questions. Did you check the breaker? Did you change the light bulb? All that information is then captured. So now as the owner,
empower them to take a few steps.
Now I can
than
move
sending
faster.
Your maintenance guy there.
Now exactly.
Right.
And then that history is logged. Now when you see successively over the next couple of years, bathroom light, you're like, and I'm replacing ballast after ballast after ballast. You're like, there's a bigger issue here.
Right.
Now you go in and check the wiring. Versus replacing ballast for 80 to 120 bucks each.
Right, you can establish trend
and so
lines.
that is something very interesting.
Yeah.
And I think the theme for folks who are in that 0 to 5 range, and is that the right range?
Typically.
Is that you've got to think about like how are you tracking this information so that you can think about your capital efficiency and your time efficiency. Because I think like people think it's passive income. It's actually quite active.
It's very
like it's I don't know who came up with like rental equals passive. It's not correlated. Right? There's
You're in the wrong
driving it.
business if you're looking for passive income through rentals.
You, I mean,
if you want to do it properly, if you want to maximize value and really
and there's that risk. And I think I think there's like this misconception that people have this empire of apartments or whatever. So easy. They're like hanging out in Palm Springs, but like there's a reality of like they've got a property manager
built with blood, sweat, and tears,
or they've done a bunch of work to get it there. Right. And so we've just found that we're helping folks with our range now is like a couple units to a few thousand units.
Cool. And what's your geographical focus?
We're focused on Canada.
Okay.
I mean, we've had interest from the US.
Of course.
We're live in 7 provinces right now. That's just more of a function of where our customers are. And what we've also tried to do, for example, like in Ontario, there are specific forms that you need. Like an N1 or the N4, the N8, and N through 13, I think. And these are forms like, let's say you're changing rent or someone wants to stay longer, extend their tenancy. You need to fill out these forms.
Right.
And our system will actually just produce the form for you. So it'll say, Ryan, you're in unit 101, your rent is this, you're getting a 2% increase. That means it's going to cost this. And then you click produce PDF and then it does it for you.
That is huge.
We had a customer who was handwriting about 150 because they had a bunch of leases coming up on July 1st. So we were talking to them in mid-May and we're like, you guys are stressed out. Like, what's going on? Like, we have to fill out these forms. And we're like, wait, what is this form? What are you doing? And that was interesting because we saw another way to help with the process.
Just to automate it. All the information already lives in the system.
Just grab it.
Transfer it into the form.
Give what is the percentage increase? 2%. Boom. Done.
Right.
Move on. Right. And so that's why we're taking time as we roll across the country is we want to make sure we've got the right, like in certain provinces, you've got a standard lease agreement that you have to use, or you need these forms, or we want to make sure that the taxes work correctly because we have a GST remittance function actually.
Oh, cool.
So if you have a commercial unit and you need to collect GST, boom, right? Or maybe you've got GST costs coming out of your accounting, so you've tracked that. We can help you produce those reports, so it's easier at the end of the year, especially for that 0 to 5 or 0 to 10 range. I should say 1 to 5. Is in that 1 to 5 range. You want to make the accounting part easier. Right. And so we've been able to develop some of those reports. So it's just like a quick couple clicks and it's ready.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you have like a developer in house who's working?
Oh my God.
On this?
Let me tell you the secret sauce. So actually my co-founder and our CTO, his name is Craig Adam. He's like a wizard at this.
Right.
And I'm so grateful because not only do we bonded over cheese pizza, and we just get along so well, but his background, he was the head of technology. So effectively like the CTO at Skip the Dishes.
Oh, cool.
And he also had other roles like at Shaw here in Calgary. And he also was managing Shaw's operation in Northern Manitoba at one point. And so how do we bring that talent for technology at scale?
For sure.
And so we have our own in-house dev team. We have our own in-house product manager. Our trick there was she's actually an accountant and learned product management. And so we brought her wealth of knowledge that's how we built our accounting system so fast. Right. And so having our own internal team helps us maintain quality.
For sure.
But also, if our customer has a problem, we can just reallocate.
You can
resources.
adapt
like in the moment. We can be like, oh my God, this has happened. Right. Because software is an ongoing journey.
For sure.
Like you can't know everything that's going to happen, and use cases always change, right? And so you want to be able to hear customer feedback, but then respond to it really quickly. And so yeah, that's our secret sauce, because we've looked at like, outsourced functions, but we find that it's just a better quality.
Yeah.
And I also think there's longevity of the work, right? Because if you own a piece of the code per se, you're gonna continue to, I think, you're gonna do a fulsome job, like a wholesome job, right? Like it's like, let's say I was, if I was just doing a quick fix on something in a home. If it's my home, I'm going to think through way more than just the minutia or the limited scope of that problem.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I think when it's kind of like a team effort when they're all in there and they're committed. And our team members have we have an employee stock option program, so everyone owns parts of the company.
Yeah.
So that also helps.
For sure. No, definitely.
Great.
Get alignment and sure everyone's on.
Everyone's in it.
Everyone's on
to
board.
win. Yeah.
I love it. Very good stuff. I'm just more curious about some of the more stressful parts. Do you have any moments of like, can't believe I made it through this day, or like the biggest challenge, or any stories regarding some of the biggest challenges?
A few.
And just learning like what could have been done to prevent it, or just wouldn't have came to be if you just didn't.
I think we don't really understand how complex it is. So even if you parallel it to like the rental journey, you just you just don't know what's going to happen sometimes.
Right, of course.
Right? Like, I mean, when I think about Propra, a lot of it is just like, you can plan for a lot of stuff.
Yep.
And you can have thought through some of the risks and stuff. Like I've done like enterprise risk strategies for like large corporations. So like, even with that training, you don't know. Like you just don't know what's coming. So I think the question is how do you, as a team, work and solve problems, right? So I think this comes to the team point of view. Is like, who's your network, or who is your peer group, or who is that person that you're talking to?
Yep.
And so for us, I think one of our strengths is that we have a really tight leadership team, where we're talking often and we're aligning on problems, and we're just ready for what's next. And so I think like, gosh, some example. Well, I'll tell you one example from a rental scenario, which is when like there was that marijuana legislation. Our neighbor was, enjoying themselves. And our unit was getting this smell come through, which makes you like, I was just like, okay. But then we had to like, actually, I met with someone, and we met with a couple of different folks. It was like, is it coming through like plumbing? Is it like electrical? Is it like an air issue?
Right.
To figure out how is that coming into our unit?
Yeah.
Right. But like, how do you can't prepare for that. Right. But like my tenant was really upset. Like he had asthma. Like it was just like this whole thing. And you're just like, I have zero time for this problem. But like it's a real problem, and you got to make time for it, right?
Yeah,
so I think that's one example on the rental side that I think about immediately. On the Propra side, I think starting a business is, I think people see like if you see the Instagram or the LinkedIn version, right?
Yeah.
Like people are really excited. They're like, oh, it looks like this, or they're always holidaying, or they're at a conference, and they're having fun, and they're seeing that picture, like people with drinks and like smiling.
Right.
But they don't see the hard work behind it. And I think that's the big thing is things take longer, right?
Yeah.
I think you can't guess what's going to happen in capital markets. So how do you plan cash flow and timing? And I think we've been naturally as a startup, we've had a pretty bumpy ride, but it's working. We're past 3 years, which is really interesting.
Amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. Because I think like we've seen other startups that haven't made it this far. That's kind of wild. So how do you, I think the other thing I think about in terms of the chaos is just, how do you take on these challenges? Which I think the answer is like you got to have people. You got to have your people. Whoever those
it's
people
almost
are.
like a cultural piece of like the stick-to-itiveness, the resiliency. Because I know, as a startup investor, you could do all the DD you want on the management team. Yeah. But it means nothing until they face adversity. Yeah. And result. Right? Like what do they do in the face of adversity? Do they splinter, or do they align and solve?
Totally. And I think that alignment piece, someone told me this yesterday, was the best way to think about that from like an investor point of view, or your partners or your people point of view, is like, he said it like, he said it in two ways. He goes, will this person do their best? And will they also do their best not to screw me over? And that's that's basically the spectrum. Yeah. It's like, if you can win on those two qualifiers, that's basically all you can commit to. Yeah. Right? Like, because you can have a projection.
Persevere with integrity almost.
Basically.
Right?
Basically. And then I think there's something else about like acknowledging the wins. Because I think sometimes we're just so focused on the bigger goal.
Yeah.
Right. So like as a startup, or if you're building a portfolio, you're like, wow, I want to own 1 million units or whatever, right? Or I want to get to $1 million in recurring revenue, whatever that number is, right? But like appreciate the fact that you have your first unit, now you have your second, now you have your third, and all those tenants extended for another year, so you don't have turnover costs.
Right. That in of itself
That
is
is
a
a
win.
victory. That's
And
so
people aren't
massive.
celebrating. We're not celebrating that enough.
No.
As entrepreneurs, as business owners, it is just that, like acknowledging you're here.
Yeah.
3 years through.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever it is, your tenants are renewing.
They're renewing.
Your vacancy rate is below whatever 4%, whatever target you set for yourself. Too often we're just so focused on the future and not recognizing all the amazing work we've done.
Yeah, I also think another thing, and this is an interesting thing in Calgary, both from a real estate lens, but also from a tech lens, is like there's this very amazing openness from a leader perspective, where if you're vulnerable to people, they'll be vulnerable with you. And I mean, it's always easy to be like, yeah, my portfolio is growing or my business is growing or whatever, but that's not the reality. Right? Like it's never perfect. Right? Like someone described me the other day as like a duck, where on the top I'm just like cruising along, but on the bottom my feet are just like scurrying, and I'm just like trying to make it somewhere. And I think like there's something special about building that community and being able to talk to people about hey, these are some of the challenges I'm facing, or how did you solve this problem? And it's sort of a bit of a recurring theme in this conversation.
Totally.
But I think there's something special about being open to talk about the problems, because you're not alone. Because I think it feels lonely sometimes. People don't understand. So how do you find that community of folks who do understand what it takes?
Do you have any specific groups or communities, memberships that you recommend specifically for people that...
Yeah, and I think from in this space, I mean, we've seen a bunch of networks. So, I mean, I think it's really important to find your people, right? So like I like to show up at some of the conferences, so like the Real Estate Forum, or even like BuildX. Like some of these conferences are really interesting ways, or like there's like a Calgary Residential Rental Association or Alberta Residential Landlord Association. Like they put together these meetings, sessions, workshops, even just trade shows and conferences. But that's a great way because all the people are coming together. It's like they're converging at the water cooler. Right. Now go find your people. Right? Because it's almost like people have self-selected.
You have people in the business of great. Now go find the like-minded.
Exactly. Right. And so how do you do that? And so same thing in tech, right? Like now I have all these little communities that I have of people who I can just message or just hop on a call with and say, hey, guess what? Or some of our advisors or investors I do that with as well. And I say, or not even, like even there's some, like I think about some investors who passed on us. And for whatever reason, like, like, you know, we had a growth fund the other day who was like, you know, like a $6 billion growth fund. And he calls me quarterly and we chat. And it's perfect because we're nowhere close to his typical investment. Like his typical investment was like 25 to 100 million US. And I was like, I mean, you can buy me now, but we're not there yet. But we talk a lot. And he also calls me and he's like, hey, I'm looking at this. And so you kind of like find relationships in places you don't expect. Simply because there's this like commonality. We connected really well. And it's almost like non-threatening because we're not like, I'm not pitching him and he's not trying to invest in me. It's just, there's something there.
Yeah. Mutually beneficial conversations.
Yeah.
So a lot of our listeners are going to be interested in your learnings, because what I see really cool from a real estate investor lens is that you're collecting all this amazing data.
Tons of data.
So what are kind of some key things that you're seeing as it relates to current challenges? And it could be something as small as a light fixture, or something as big as change in regulation. But what are a few things that you're seeing that you think are
big things?
Our listeners would be really interested in?
Yeah, I mean, a couple trends and a couple things that have come up. I mean, one is each province is different, but in Alberta, they just introduced new regulation around security deposits and how that there's a collection of interest now, right? And so sometimes you don't know about these things.
Okay.
Right? So if you have a security deposit and you're returning it, anything that has from January 1st, 2024 on is earning at 1.6% interest.
Okay.
So when you return that security deposit, that tenant actually earns some interest on that money.
1.6% interest.
1.6% interest.
Right.
So you can go, I mean, if you just Google it, you can find this.
Yeah.
Hopefully 1.6% is right. And hopefully Jacob first is right. I mean, check my work. But I mean, like 99.9% for sure. So, I mean, that's one thing is like understanding how regulation evolves. And this is also where your community comes in.
And even
For
in
sure.
their workflow, right? Like this is, now you got a different calculation when you return it. And if you're doing it at scale, but not leveraging technology or automation, man, that just created hours of work.
Or
And then
just
even
understanding
thinking
the
about,
formula.
shit, I should have that security deposit in a GIC, right? Like I should be, ideally, regardless of your size, you should be leveraging that security deposit for the benefit of your business. And in turn, making sure you're not losing when you return the 1.6.
Well, and previous regulation was actually that it was 0% in Alberta.
Right.
Which is why when you get a security deposit, you just get it back.
Here,
now-
dollar for dollar.
And so different provinces have different regulations on this. So I think that's one, is just understanding the regulatory environment. I think number two is the accounting piece. Is really just making sure that you're putting in the work, you're doing that reconciliation.
So few do, especially at small. So few are
No
just
one
doing
cares.
it.
And then suddenly you hit that account, like it's like, I mean, when are taxes due? I should know this, but
End of April?
End of April. Okay, thank you. Perfect. Right. And you're like at the 30 days in April. 30 days in April, right? And you're like at the 28th, and you're like, oh, I should figure this out.
Scrambling.
And you're trying to find these receipts. And
Right.
I mean, just do it on a regular basis because the thing is also
Or worse, you get audited and nothing's, you have poor documentation.
for documentation. So I think documentation is really important. And then I think the last thing is just spend time asking why or learning more about the problem. So if you, for example, like this bathroom light example that we've referred to, what is the deeper problem, right? Or if you have a tenancy issue, trust your gut, because you kind of know when you know, and sometimes you're just like, nah, it's fine. It's not fine, right? Like you will end up dealing with a bigger problem later. And because it's on the side of your desk, I think sometimes it's very easy to think about, this is something that we'll solve later, or it'll be fine, don't worry about it.
Right.
But so a lot of the times these things compound. And it's like dating, right? It's like the honeymoon in the beginning, and then when you get on with it, then you really understand. It's the same thing with your residents or your tenants, right? And so how do you just build great processes, be it doing the background check or just staying in touch, right? Like I've always found that if I can have a decent relationship with that person where I can check in and just say, hey, how's things going? Or, hey, Merry Christmas, I'm going to drop off a bottle of wine, some chocolates, and I can also take a peek in the unit. That's kind of interesting.
That goes a long way,
right? And it goes a long way because they're just like, hey, come on in, have a cup of tea or whatever, right? And it's not that I'm like trying to inspect their place, because I could just give them notice to be like, let me come by. But it's also about relationship building. And so I think this is also that community piece or that peer group piece, which is you're working with those people you want to work with, right? And that there's alignment with. So I think those are some of the big trends we're seeing is regulatory, have great systems and structure so you can manage it well and just trust your gut.
And I guess with your system now, like if you're logging, you could test all this, right? Like, especially if you have a big portfolio, if you have a couple thousand units,
even 100,
half of these I'm going to do Christmas cards and check in, half I'm not. Hypothesis is I'm going to get less NSFs. You could truly test for that with your system.
Or even if you just focus on those people that you think are at risk. And you
you segment you you don't
have to do the whole portfolio.
That's
because some of those people you already know they've got great credit, they pay regularly, or you just have pre-authorized debit, and there's just it's been clockwork.
Where when you feel like you're taking a chance, okay, I'm gonna employ this system to increase the likelihood of success with this tenant.
And sometimes your gut is actually really great, and this is partly where that experience comes in. But maybe you take a chance on someone. Maybe they have an improving credit score. Right? Maybe they've got a good job now. Maybe they've had some life changes. Right. I was talking to one of our customers, and he was talking about how it was a couple. The husband passed away. The wife's by herself now, widowed. She's trying to figure it out. Her credit score got impacted, but in general, she's a pretty good tenant. He's like, so why should I punish her? And like he's like, I can't just take a background check and look at it in a binary way. He's like, the number is it's not black and white.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
And so how do you, and maybe that's where you build a relationship and you do some check-ins, but you're also kind of doing good. Making it easy for some folks.
For sure.
There's something special there.
Cool.
Awesome. Just curious about next few years. Any goals for?
God, I don't know. I mean, we're continuing to grow. We had some great year-over-year growth last year.
Awesome.
4x. so in revenue. So it's pretty exciting. Hopefully.
Is that Forex in revenue, Forex in new users as well, or?
It's a bit sort of.
Okay.
Yes, in a way, because we've also expanded our suite of services. So one of the things that we do is
That's what I was curious about.
Yeah.
Are you kind of
It's a bit,
layering on features?
Exactly.
Okay.
So one of the things that we've done is like we have our core software product, but then we also collect rent, and so there's a transaction fee for that. It's just like printer paper. It's like a consumable.
Yeah.
So there's the transaction fee. We also built a marketplace, because when people move in, a lot of those residents are asking those landlords and property managers, hey, where do I buy internet, and where do I get TV from, and where do I buy insurance? Do you have a local cleaner? And so we actually have a little marketplace where folks can just point them to. Interesting. That's creating a little tiny revenue stream for us, but it's more about like qualifying leads and doing great work.
And it's great client experience.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and it's like one place, get it done, move on.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
The very interesting one that we've launched this year is a bookkeeping feature. And so for folks who are like, I don't want to do this, we actually just charge an incremental cost on a per unit basis.
Okay.
And we do your managed bookkeeping for you.
Cool.
And that's actually very interesting.
For sure.
Because we've seen interest from folks, like the current company we're talking to has like 5,000 units. Jeez. And they're just like, we hate the accounting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's interesting, because
So
that's not his core business. So we may pick up a portion of their accounting, like maybe for, I think, about 30% of their portfolio. We may pick up some of the accounting work for them. But it's just, they're burning a bunch of time and they're doing a lot of extra work. And so can we make it more efficient?
Cool.
Yeah. So I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
And I think it's also just like exciting. Like last month we landed 2 customers in New Brunswick. So we were in our 7th province. And so I think it's just like a journey. To quickly answer your question directly, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I just, like we're looking to break even next year, which is great for a software company to do it in under 2 years from product launch.
Yeah.
So that'll be fantastic. 3 years from product launch, next year. We've had interest from the US, so maybe we'll go to the US, but I think we really want to focus on our customer, right? So maybe, a couple units to a few thousand units, that's our core. And just how do we continue to create value for them? Because if we're creating value for them, then we're doing good work.
Create the best possible platform.
And we'll continue to grow. And so we love that feedback. We want to hear the feedback and we want to respond to that feedback. And sometimes it's easy, right? Sometimes it's so like simple, right? Like someone can just whip it up. Sometimes it's complex, and we almost want to survey our customer base to understand different use cases so that we can bring the best practice forward.
Yeah. Like I'm curious, like it sounds like the dev team is strong, and in turn you can be agile and adapt, but how do you strategically understand what the customer wants and decide what to employ? Because if you're consistently tweaking, one tweak here is going to result in what another client didn't want. So how do you aggregate those responses and decide on what to implement?
What often happens is that we hear a common use case.
Right.
And there are some edge cases, and we can't solve those.
No.
Right? We can never solve those.
Yeah.
Right? And so a lot of it is around what is the common use, and then just using some like reasonable deduction to be like, is this reasonable? And we go in and we test that idea. We say, listen, we talked to 3 customers, 9 customers, whatever, and this is how we're thinking about this process. And then people are like, well, what about this? What about that? I'm like, well, is that an internal process problem?
Yeah.
Or is that a software problem?
Right.
Because everyone's like, oh, I just want to click a button and then it's done. Yeah. And I'm like, well, it doesn't, it doesn't work like that. You still, like on Instacart, you still have to go and select the items. You can't just be like, order groceries, like take a picture of your fridge, order groceries, like it's not that simple, right? So how do we work with folks? And so then we go back and we actually suggest this is the approach. And oftentimes it's a good discussion. Yeah. And by the time we end, we kind of settle on what we proposed or near what we proposed, but we want the feedback. Yeah. Because we don't actually know. Or sometimes we propose it and people are like, oh, that's interesting. I could do that. Yeah. And then their model is easier, or maybe someone has a little more capacity to go do something else. Right. Because I think in this business also there's your important list, but then there's the urgent list, which is the stuff you write on the top of the margin, and you're kind of squeezing in. And then at the end of the day, you're like, well, what happened to my important tasks that I didn't get done?
Right. What are those high value tasks that may not be urgent. Exactly. But if you don't attend to them, then you're not going to be able to execute to your fullest capacity, capability.
Exactly. So
Cool.
like it could be like shopping a mortgage or just keeping up
Yeah.
with the market.
Yeah.
Or learning about, programs like the MLI Select program, right? Like you need to spend time to understand these things.
Reaching out to the next realtor, looking at
Yeah.
Edmonton to invest, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Doing that reading or that work. So
Cool.
yeah.
Cool. And do you currently hold any real estate investments?
Not anymore.
Okay.
And so we sold our last unit in November.
Okay.
But that's mostly because I'm already long on the real estate business with a software company.
And allowing you to focus on what you deem today to be the most high value task.
Yeah. And that's, I think it's one of the things I wanted to share also is like it's a timing thing in your journey.
Yeah.
Right. I am very interested in owning real estate and owning a portfolio like multifamily. I will get back into it.
Right.
For sure. It all depends. It's just a timing thing.
Yep.
But, and I think it's also like economic cycles, right?
Yep.
And also what's happening in life, right? Like, where do you want to be spending capital? Do you think there's a more efficient place to put it? I think sometimes it's really easy to think about, okay, if I hold on longer, I can sell it for higher. But if you take out that money and that equity between your sell price and your equity, or minus fees, et cetera, whatever that leftover cash is, could you do something more efficient with it? Right? Like I bet from a timing perspective, look back 6 months and you could put it in Bitcoin and, you would have had 3 extra money or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think those are things you can't think about. Right. But I think about like, when was the right time? I think for us, it was the right time to kind of come out of these units. Also, we were spending a bunch of money on condo fees. That's actually the truth. We were spending a bunch of money on condo fees and I hated it. So I wanted out. So we found a great opportunity to make that move. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect. Any other final words, advice, insights that you'd like to share that we didn't really touch on that you think would be
I think the themes
valuable?
are pretty clear. Like problem solving, understand the problem, and team.
Yep.
Right. I think like when I think about the Propra journey or any journey of my own, for example, is like having a strong team has been fantastic.
Totally. So on maybe just so I'm clear, like in Propra, we have Al-Karim, we have
Craig,
the CTO.
Yep.
Who else is
part of my leadership team?
Yeah.
So we have Kaylee, who runs operations,
Kate,
which is like customer success, which is really collaborating with our customers. She also leads marketing, and just kind of helps run the business, the operations of the business. And then we have Karen, and she's our product manager. She's also an accountant, so she does our books.
Oh, good.
Pretty convenient.
Yeah.
And the four
nice
of us
to be able to stay lean as a startup.
exactly. And we're a small team, right? But I think like the key message there is like if you have a great group of people that you surround yourself with and you have alignment with and you can solve a problem with and you can have a tough conversation with, that's the key. And even in the scenario of like, if it's just like a couple who's having these conversations, right?
Yeah.
That's great, right? But being able to have those tough conversations and finding alignment, I think has been very helpful because you just cannot guess everything that's going to come your way.
Yep.
And even to sometimes you have so many opportunities. How do you say yes and no to things?
Yep.
Or even tough conversations. Like we've had scenarios where we've had customers with like thousands of doors come to us and they're like, but we really need this.
Right.
And that would take our product roadmap off track for like 2 months. And so do we displace a bunch of work for a customer
To try to land one customer. Yeah.
it's really tricky. It's really tricky. And so how do you as a group or as a pair or whatever have those tough conversations? And I think it's the alignment.
Yep.
And it's also just the culture. Like
Alignment culture.
when you get along well, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And sometimes even just it's like openly talking about it. Right? Hey, I felt some friction here. What's going on?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not you. This is a hard problem and I hate it. Cool. That itself feels great, right?
Right.
You're like, oh, it's not me, And I think sometimes like in business, especially with you, when you're putting your, real estate, you're putting yourself online, like, you have a family, you have kids, you have all these commitments. It's personal, right?
Yeah.
Like people talk about like business and personal, but like it's
you.
Everything.
Yeah.
Like you identify, this is sometimes your identity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think
Your feelings, your thoughts, your convictions, it's
your free time.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is not like entrepreneurship isn't like a 9 to 5 thing. And for folks who are investing in, 1 to 5 or more properties, you're doing this on the side of your desk. It's coming out of your quality time. It's coming out of your family time. It's coming out of your time with your friends or your parents or whatever. And so you're making that sacrifice and you want to make sure that it's working. And so sometimes coming back to that, if you can have that tough conversation, say, hey, what happened? Great, right? It just helps a long ways to solve the problem sooner.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree. Yeah. Awesome. And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they're interested?
Yeah, I mean, you can email me at info@propra.ca or Al-Karim, Al-Karim @propra.ca. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, and we always respond. So we have a customer success team. So they're there. So
yeah, I'm sure Google pulls you up.
Google, yeah. I mean, that whole thing about Google as well. You can pretty much find me.
Cool.
Yeah, but honored to be part of this and appreciate this reflective conversation.
Yeah, thanks for joining us and taking time.
Yeah, this was excellent.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the time, and looking forward to staying in touch and hearing how Propra goes over the next few years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
That wraps up another episode of the Real Estate and Wealth Podcast. Be sure to hit that like button, share with fellow real estate enthusiasts, and subscribe to stay in the loop on all upcoming episodes. Get in touch with the team at Calvert Home Mortgage Investment Corporation by calling them at 1-888-752-4642 or email admin@chmic.ca. The opinions expressed in each episode belong to the individuals featured and do not represent the views of Calvert Home Mortgage. While we provide valuable insights, consulting with qualified professionals ensures that your unique financial circumstances are carefully considered, aligning your investments with your long-term objectives. Calvert Home Mortgage Investment Corporation is not a financial advisor, and we cannot advise you on making investments. There are risks to investing in real estate and the potential that you can lose all of your investment.